Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You cannot make people think like you. You cannot make people move like you. You cannot make people value what you value. And the faster you accept that truth, the faster your life starts bleeding energy. If we know we cannot make other people beat us, why do we keep trying? Because tonight I'm not here to motivate you with glitter. I'm here to tell the truth with gasoline. Have you ever tried to explain something to somebody and they just stand there looking at you like your words are subtitles in another language? You talking passion, they hearing background noise. You offering vision, they offering confusion. You saying, listen, this makes sense. They saying, I don't see it. And somewhere inside your chest, a voice whispers, how do they not get this? The frustration starts small. You repeat yourself, you explain it again, you break it down, you add examples, you use analogies, you draw pictures in the air with your hands, you say it louder, you say it slower, you say it again, and suddenly you realize something terrifying. They still don't see it. And now you're mad because somewhere deep down we carry a quiet expectation. If something makes sense to me, it should make sense to you. But that expectation is the seed of a thousand frustrations. Here is the hidden belief nobody talks about. We secretly assume that people are supposed to think the way we think. Not exactly, but close enough. We expect similar priorities, similar logic, similar emotional reactions. And when that doesn't happen, we fear resistance. We feel confusion. Sometimes we feel disrespect. People are not failing to be you. They were never hired for the job. Think about that. Your expectations accidentally assigned people a role they never auditioned for. You expected them to understand your priorities, but their priorities were built in a different environment, different childhood, different fears, different wins, different losses, different wiring, different scars, different stories. And yet we stand there like emotional supervisors asking the question, why aren't you performing the job I never told you about? Imagine having the greatest pair of shoes you ever worn, comfortable, stylish, perfect fit. You walk around feeling like royalty. So naturally, you say, everybody needs these shoes. You tell your friends, you recommend them, you hype them up. You say these shoes will change your life. Then somebody tries them on and they hate them. They say the shoes hurt. They say the shoes feel tight. They say they look weird. And suddenly you're confused. How? These are amazing shoes. But the truth is simple. The shoes fit your feet, not theirs. And that is the moment where wisdom must interrupt ego because some people try to force the shoe anyway. They start arguing about the shoe. They debate the shoe. They defend the shoe. They build presentations about the shoe. But the truth never changed. The shoe simply wasn't built for those feet. Some of us are exhausted not because life is hard, but because we are trying to make people wear shoes that don't fit them. We want them to think like us. We want them to prioritize like us. We want them to dream like us. We want them to move like us. We want them to respond like us. But the moment you expect that, you have quietly entered the business of emotional control. And control is expensive. Control costs patience. Control costs energy. Control costs relationships. Control costs peace. Because when people refuse to become a reflection of you, you start feeling like you are losing. You're not losing, you're learning. You're learning where reality begins and ego ends. Trying to make people be you doesn't just damage relationships, it reveals something about you, something uncomfortable. Something powerful, something most people never examine. I'm going to show you the real reason people try to force others to see the world their way. It's not logic, it's not persuasion, it's not communication, it's something else. And once you see it, you will never argue the same way again. Why does disagreement make some people so uncomfortable? Not discussion, not debate, disagreement. Why does it feel like friction in the soul? Because sometimes disagreement doesn't feel like disagreement. Sometimes it feels like rejection. And the moment disagreement feels like rejection, logic leaves the room. Most people believe arguments are about ideas. They're not. Arguments are usually about identity. You say an idea, but people hear a challenge. You say a suggestion, but people hear a threat. You offer a perspective, but they feel like their intelligence just got questioned. And the brain moves fast when it feels threatened. Faster than logic, faster than patience, faster than wisdom, because the brain has one job: protect the ego. And when the ego feels attacked, it doesn't defend truth, it defends territory. Imagine a person builds a house. They spend years building it, brick by brick, memory by memory, experience by experience. That house becomes their worldview, their beliefs, their opinions, their understanding of how life works. Now you walk in the door and say, "You should move this. You should move this wall." Now listen carefully. You think you are offering design advice, but to them it sounds like demolition because that wall might be holding up their whole emotional roof. So they defend the wall, not because the wall is perfect, but because removing it would shake the house. And most people will defend a weak wall before they rebuild the house. This is where frustration grows because when we see something clearly, we assume clarity is contagious. We assume if we explain it well enough, people will immediately understand. But clarity is not contagious. Clarity is personal. Two people can look at the exact same situation and see two completely different realities. One sees opportunity, one sees danger, one sees possibility, one sees risk, one sees growth, one sees loss. And both people think they are being rational. So the question becomes, what do you do when your clarity is not someone else's clarity? Do you force it? Do you argue it? Do you repeat yourself until your voice sounds like a broken record? Or do you learn something most people never learn? Energy is currency. Every conversation costs something. Every argument withdraws something. Every attempt to force agreement spends something. And if you're not careful, you will spend emotional energy on people who were never going to buy what you are selling. Not because they're bad, not because they're wrong, but because they're standing in a different store. You selling winter coats. They shopping for sunglasses. And you yelling, "But the coats are amazing." And they saying, "But it's summer." Now neither one of you is crazy. You're just in different seasons. Let me show you something about rivers. A river flows forward, always forward. But if you drop a rock in the river, the water does not stop. The water does not argue. The water does not lecture the rock. The water flows around it. And eventually, the river still reaches the ocean. Some people in your life are rocks. They will not move the way you want. They will not flow the way you expect. They will not see what you see when you see it. And if you waste all your energy trying to move the rock, you stop flowing. Now, here's where freedom begins. The moment you realize something simple but powerful, you are not responsible for making people understand you. You are responsible for living your truth clearly enough that understanding becomes optional. Let me say that again because somebody needs to hear it twice. You are not responsible for making people understand you. You are responsible for living clearly, living honestly, living consistently, living in a way where your actions become your argument. Because persuasion is loud, but example is permanent. If we're honest, sometimes we don't want understanding. We want validation. We want confirmation. We want proof that our way is the right way. And that desire, that quiet hunger for validation, is where the real trap begins. Because when validation becomes oxygen, disagreement starts feeling like surrounding validation. My humans crave it, why it can quietly control your decisions, and why the strongest people in the world eventually learn to live without needing it. What happens inside you when someone says you're wrong? Not politely wrong, not maybe consider another option. I mean wrong, wrong. The kind of wrong that lands in the room like a brick through a window. What happens in your chest? What happens in your breathing? What happens in your thoughts? Because in that moment, something interesting occurs. Your brain doesn't ask, are they correct? Your brain asks, how dare they? Human beings are wired for belonging. From the moment we enter this world, our survival depends on connection. Approval means safety. Agreement means acceptance. Validation means you still belong. So when someone disagrees with us, our nervous system sometimes reacts like we're being pushed out of the tribe. And the brain whispers in ancient fear, if I'm wrong, maybe I don't belong. Now watch how subtle this becomes. People stop chasing truth and start chasing agreement. People stop asking questions and start defending positions. People stop listening and start preparing rebuttals. Because validation feels like oxygen, and once somebody depends on oxygen, they panic when the room changes. Imagine standing on a stage. You speak, the crowd applauds, feels good. You speak again, more applause. Now imagine the third time you speak, and the room goes silent. No clapping, no reaction, just stillness. That silence can feel louder than applause because silence creates doubt. And doubt triggers the question that makes people uncomfortable. Did I lose the room? Now, here is the dangerous part. Some people become words to keep the clapping coming. They stop saying the real thing. They start saying the popular thing. And slowly the performance replaces the person. Look at the world we live in right now. Social media approval, likes, shares, comments, algorithms feeding validation like sugar. People measuring their value in digital applause. A post gets attention, dopamine. A post gets ignored, self doubt, and slowly a quiet pressure grows. Say what people agree with. Believe what people agree with. Move how people agree with. But here is the problem. If your identity depends on agreement, your courage will always be negotiable because the moment the crowd disagrees, you start shrinking. There comes a moment in personal growth where something shifts. You start asking, and you start asking, is it true? You stop asking, will this make everyone comfortable? And you start asking, is this honest? You stop asking, will they approve? And you start asking, can I stand on this? That shift is called inner authority. Inner authority means your compass works even when nobody claps, even when nobody agrees, even when the room goes quiet. A lighthouse does not argue with the ocean. A lighthouse does not debate the storm. A lighthouse does not chase ships to convince them the rocks are real. The lighthouse simply shines consistently, patiently, relentlessly. Ships that see it adjust. Ships that ignore it learn the hard way. But the lighthouse never stops being the lighthouse. And that is the difference between influence and control. Influence shines, control chases. Let me ask you something. What would you believe if nobody applauded it? What would you say if nobody validated it? If nobody understood it? Because the moment your direction stops depending on agreement, your freedom begins multiplying. And here's the irony: the people who stop chasing validation often end up receiving the most respect. Not because everyone agrees, but because consistency builds trust. There's still one layer deeper. Because if we're honest, most people don't try to control others just for validation. There's another reason, a quieter reason, a fear most people never admit out loud. The fear that if other people choose differently, maybe we chose wrong. Think about that. What happens when someone else's life choices make you question your own? Have you ever watched somebody make a life decision that made you uncomfortable? Not because it hurt you, not because it didn't make sense to you. They quit the job. They moved to another city. They changed careers. They changed beliefs. They started living differently. And something inside you whispered, why would they do that? Now stay with me, because that whisper can turn into something louder, something sharper. Sometimes Sometimes that whisper becomes a judgment. Comparison is one of the brain's oldest habits. The brain constantly asks questions like, am I ahead? Am I behind? Am I doing this right? Am I winning? And one of the fastest ways the brain tries to answer those questions is by watching other people. But here's the problem: other people's lives are edited highlights. You're watching the scoreboard without seeing the practice. You're watching the outcome without seeing the process. You're watching the decision without seeing the dilemma, the conclusions of incomplete evidence. Imagine standing at a racetrack. 5 runners start the race. Each runner has a different lane, different stride, different pace, different training, different history, different body type, different strategy. But imagine runner number 3 suddenly jumps into runner number 4's lane. Why? Because runner number 4 looks faster. Now chaos begins. They collide. They slow down. They lose rhythm. The race becomes messy. And suddenly nobody is running their best race. Comparison does the same thing in life. The moment you jump into someone else's lane, you lose your rhythm. There is a powerful principle successful people eventually learn: stay in your lane, not because other lanes are bad, but because your lane was designed for your stride, your calling. Now listen carefully. Staying in your lane doesn't mean ignoring others. It means learning from them without trying to become them. Because inspiration lifts you. Imitation traps you, and it gets uncomfortable because sometimes we try to control other people's decisions because their freedom exposes our fear. If they take that, say, what does that say about me saying them? If they tasted their dream, what does that say about me staying comfortable? If they break the pattern, what does that say about me staying stuck? Suddenly, their courage starts questioning our caution. And instead of admitting that tension, we criticize the decision. You've heard the story: a bucket full of crabs. One crab tries to climb out, the other crabs pull it back down. Now, most people think that story is about jealousy. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's about discomfort because the crab climbing out introduces a new possibility. Escape and new possibilities force uncomfortable questions. If escape is possible, why am I still here? There comes a moment where maturity arises, and maturity sounds like this: their life is their responsibility. My life is my responsibility. Their choices belong to them. My choices belong to me. Their path does not invalidate my path. Their pace does not diminish my pace. Their success does not erase my success. And their mistakes do not define my wisdom, because life was never designed to be a synchronized routine. It's a collection of individual journeys crossing paths for a season. But here's the deeper twist in this story. Once you stop trying to control people, once you stop comparing yourself to people, once you stop demanding validation from people, something surprising happens. You start seeing people differently, not as competitors, not as threats, not as obstacles, but as reflections. And when you learn how to read those reflections, people become teachers. Every personality, every disagreement, every interaction becomes a lesson, but that requires something most people resist: humility. What if the people who frustrate you the most are actually revealing something you need to see? Not about them, about you. Now I know that it sounds uncomfortable because most of us prefer a simpler story. They are wrong, they are difficult, they are stubborn, they are the problem. But growth rarely begins with that sentence. Growth begins with a different question. What is this moment teaching me? Life has a strange way of delivering lessons. Sometimes the teacher looks wise. Sometimes the teacher looks annoying. Sometimes the teacher looks like the person who just got on your last nerve. But the lesson doesn't disappear just because we dislike the messenger. Think about that. Some of the most powerful lessons you will ever learn arrive wrapped in irritation. Imagine walking into a gym. You pick up a weight. The weight feels heavy. Your muscles start shaking. Your body resists. Now imagine yelling at the weight. You're too heavy. Why are you like this? This is ridiculous. But the weight isn't the problem. The weight is the training. Persistence is the workout. And the strength you want comes from the resistance you keep trying to avoid. People who disagree with you are resistance. People who frustrate you are resistance. People who refuse to think like you are resistance. And resistance can either irritate you or improve you, because resistance forces questions. Why does this bother me? Why does this trigger me? Why do I need them to change? Why does their difference feel threatening? Those questions sharpen awareness, and awareness builds wisdom. Here is one of the hardest truths about personal growth. Sometimes we are not trying to change people for their benefit. We are trying to change people for our comfort. We want smoother conversations. We want easier agreement. We want fewer disruptions. Comfort is peaceful. Growth is messy. Comfort whispers. Growth interrupts. Comfort keeps things familiar. Growth changes the furniture. Driving forward while staring in the rearview mirror is dangerous. But emotionally, many people live exactly like that. They are constantly watching what other people are doing, constantly comparing, constantly reacting, constantly measuring. But forward progress requires a shift in focus. You glance at the mirror, but you drive through the windshield. The windshield shows possibility, the mirror shows history. And too much mirror time will crash your future. There comes a moment when you realize something liberating. You cannot control people. You cannot control their opinions. You cannot control their reactions. You cannot control their understanding. But you can control three powerful things: your clarity, your boundaries, your direction. Clarity means knowing what matters to you. Boundary means protecting that clarity. Direction means moving forward whether others agree or not. Now, here's the surprising part. When you stop trying to control people, relationships start changing. Arguments decrease, stress drops, conversations feel lighter, because you are no longer trying to force agreement. You are simply expressing truth. And something interesting happens. Some people move closer, some people move away. And both outcomes are information. The moment you stop trying to make people be you, you finally get permission to be fully you. And when that realization hits the room, the atmosphere changes. You are not the manager of everybody's mind. Look at somebody near you and say, I am not the manager of everybody's mind. Now say it again like you mean it. I am not the manager of everybody's mind. Some of us have been carrying a job title we were never hired for. Chief explainer, head of convincing, director of persuasion, supervisor of other people's choices. But tonight, somebody in this room is about to resign from that position because trying to manage everybody's mind is exhausting work. You explain, they resist. You explain again, they misunderstand. You explain louder, they dig deeper. You're tired, not because life is heavy, but because you're carrying responsibility that never belonged to you. Imagine walking around with a backpack full of rocks. Every rock has a name. This rock is my cousin's opinion. This rock is my coworker's approval. This rock is my friend's agreement. This rock is my neighbor's expectations. This rock is the internet's validation. Now imagine dropping that backpack, just letting it fall. The moment the straps leave your shoulders, you realize something. You are stronger than you thought. You were carrying weight you didn't need. Let me give you a sentence that will change your peace level immediately. Everybody is allowed to have their own mind, even when it disagrees with mine, even when it misunderstands mine, even when it questions mine, even when it rejects mine. Everybody. Now watch what happens when you accept that. Arguments lose their grip. Frustration loses its power because disagreement stops feeling like a personal attack. It becomes information. When you give people permission to be themselves, you also give yourself permission to be yourself. That's the exchange. Control disappears. Authenticity appears because the moment you stop performing for approval, your real voice shows up. Your real thoughts show up. Your real direction shows up. And something powerful begins happening. Peace starts growing. Think about music for a moment. A choir does not sing one note. A band does not play one instrument. A symphony is beautiful because of differences. Trumpets sound different than violins. Drums sound different than pianos. Voices sound different than horns. But together, the differences create harmony. Now imagine the trumpet yelling at the piano, "Why don't you sound like me?" The music would collapse because harmony requires differences. So tonight I want to ask the room something. What if the people who don't think like you are not obstacles? What if they are simply different instruments, different tones, different rhythms, different roles, different sounds? And what if the real beauty of life is learning how those sounds can exist together without control? Because control kills harmony. Respect creates it. Let me hear the room for a second. If you know you've been trying to control people, say, that was me. If you know you've been frustrated trying to make people understand you, say, that was me. If you know you spent too much time explaining yourself, say, that was me. Now listen carefully. Tonight that season ends. Tonight somebody stops arguing. Tonight somebody stops explaining. Tonight somebody stops chasing agreement because you finally understand something powerful. I cannot make other people be me. And the moment I stop trying, my peace multiplies. But before we close this journey, there is one final realization. realization. Because letting people be themselves is only half the story. The other half is courage. The courage to be fully yourself, even when people don't understand you, even when people question you, even when people disagree with you. The moment you stand in your truth without apology, I cannot make other people be me. And once that truth landed in my spirit, something incredible happened. I've stopped fighting battles that were never mine. There comes a moment in every growing life when a quiet shift occurs. You stop asking, how do I make them understand me? And you start asking, how do I understand myself? How do I convince them? And you start asking, am I living honestly? Because here's the truth nobody tells you when you are younger. The longer you live, the more you realize people see life through different windows, different experiences, different fears, different expectations, different dreams. So trying to make everyone share your window is like trying to make the whole world stand in the same room. Now imagine walking through a forest with the compass. The compass always points north. Not because everyone agrees with North, not because North is popular, not because North is comfortable. The compass points north because that is its truth. And if the compass tried to change directions every time someone disagreed, nobody would ever find their way home. Some of you in this room have been spinning like a broken compass. One day you point toward your dream, the next day someone questions you and you turn. One day you believe in your vision. The next day someone laughs and you turn. One day you speak your truth. The next day someone disapproves and you shrink. But tonight something changes. Tonight the compass resets because clarity does not require agreement. Purpose does not require applause. Truth does not require permission. If you know you have spent too many years explaining yourself, say no more. If you know you have spent too many years chasing approval, say no more. If you know you have spent too many years trying to make everybody understand your path, say no more. Now say this with me. I release the job of managing everybody's mind. Say it again. I release the job of managing everybody's mind. Now say this one louder. I cannot make other people be me. But here's the beautiful part. I don't have to because the goal of life was never to clone yourself. The goal was to discover yourself. Not to manufacture agreement, but to cultivate clarity, not to control people, but to understand people. And the moment that understanding grows, something remarkable happens. Your peace expands, your patience expands, your confidence expands because you finally realize something powerful. Other people's opinions are information. They are not instructions. Think about light. Light does not chase darkness. Light does not argue with darkness. Light simply shines, and when the light appears, darkness adjusts automatically. So the real assignment in life is simple. Shine clearly, speak honestly, move boldly, stand firmly, not to force people to see what you see, but to give them the opportunity to see it if they choose. And here's the final revelation tonight. The moment you stop trying to make other people be you, you finally become free enough to become your best self because control disappears, comparison disappears, validation loses its grip, and peace begins to grow. So tonight we walk out of this room with one powerful understanding. I cannot make other people think like me. I cannot make other people believe like me. I cannot make other people move like me. But I can live with clarity. I can live with courage. I can live with conviction. And that is more than enough because the world does not need copies. The world needs authenticity. So stand tall, stand clear, stand strong. And remember this sentence: when life tries to pull you back into the trap, I cannot make other people be me, but I can make sure I never stop being me. And when your life is like that, life starts feeling like a fight and starts feeling like freedom. And that freedom belongs to you. Lord, let me start this prayer with the question that shakes the room. What happens when we finally stop trying to be everybody's answer and start becoming who you designed us to be? What happens when the pressure to impress people gets replaced with the peace of pleasing you? Because tonight, Lord, we are confronting a truth that frees the soul. I cannot make other people be me. And maybe that was never the assignment in the first place. Heavenly God, creator of minds that think differently, maker of hearts that beat with different rhythms, designer of personalities that carry different patterns. We come before you tonight with honesty. Sometimes we try too hard to make people understand us. We explain, we repeat, we persuade, we defend, we debate. And sometimes, Lord, we exhaust ourselves trying to convince people to see what we see. But tonight we pause, we breathe, we remember something powerful. You did not create a world full of copies. You created a world full of contrast. And contrast is not confusion, contrast is design. Lord, you made mountains and oceans. Both beautiful, both powerful, both different. The mountain stands still, the ocean moves constantly. The mountain speaks in silence, the ocean speaks in waves, and neither one apologizes for being what it was created to be. So, why do we apologize for being ourselves? Why do we bend our beliefs to gain approval? Why do we twist our voices to keep the peace? Why do we shrink our purpose just to fit someone else's comfort zone? Lord, tonight we ask for a revelation. Teach us the difference between influence and control, because influence shines, but control suffocates. Influence inspires, but control demands. Influence invites, but control forces. And forcing people to be us was never part of our calling. God, life sometimes feels like a room full of mirrors. People reflect opinions, reflect expectations, reflect judgments, reflect assumptions. And if we stare at those reflections too long, we forget who we are. But tonight we look back to the